everyone. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 156, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. As always, please keep your headphones away from the microphone and also do not touch the microphone. I'm getting... Is the translation not working? It is now. Perfect. Keep your headphones away from the microphones at all times to protect the hearing of our valued interpreters, and do not touch the mic. We have two opening statements. We'll go to you virtually, Mr. Beaton, first. Go ahead for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Everybody, it's wonderful to be here. My name is Jacob Beaton. My tribal name is Jaffa-Shkatman-Skeek. I am Eagle Clan, Tsimshan Haida Heltzik from the Northwest Coast. Thank you very much for inviting me and for having me here. I've worked for First Nations my whole career, dozens of different nations over a couple decades. I'm a First Nations business owner and entrepreneur and have been my whole career. And I currently own and operate an award-winning business that's Indigenous-led. I'll be talking a bit more about that standard, Indigenous-led. I've been the winner of the Young Indigenous Entrepreneur of the Year, winner of the BC Land Award, Canada's Food Hero to the United Nations, and most recently a recipient of the King's Coronation Medal. And I'm currently a thought leader to the BC Auditor General. So very happy that I've been invited and get to answer some of your questions. I've been successful in business because I don't just identify problems, but come up with solutions. And I understand we're talking about problems and solutions here today. And that's the essence of what business is to me, is the identifications of problems and then delivering consistently effective solutions. So I just first want to start with the problems that we're trying to solve here. So first of all, I'm sure everyone's aware of the history of systemic economic oppression of First Nations and Indigenous peoples in Canada. So as an example, here in BC, there's this wonderful old book I picked up for free called Indians.
Sorry, Mr. Beaton, I have to interrupt you for a couple seconds because we have our vote bell. So we have a little procedural thing. Okay. Bear with me 2 seconds. Colleagues, we have bells. Can we have you see that we'll continue and perhaps vote virtually in the room so we can get as much time possible? Wonderful. What we'll do is a couple minutes before the actual vote, we'll just suspend. And then once everyone has successfully voted, we'll gavel back in. Perfect. Thanks very much, everyone. Mr. Beaton, go ahead, sir.
No problem. I was warned, so I'm not surprised. Thank you. So yeah, some of the challenges is that here, for example, on the West Coast, First Nations were very active parts of the economy and then were systemically removed. And that's not just Indian Act, but collusion on the parts, for example, of churches, provincial government, corporations, and individuals. So one example of this in my sector is pass and permit policy under the Indian Act, which wasn't repealed until 2014 and forbid Indigenous First Nations people specifically from purchasing anything to do with food production or selling or trading or giving away food. So the ghosts of Indian Act and Indian Act policies currently reverberate throughout institutions and manifests many times as institutionalized racism. So I've got a quote here from my friend George, who's First Nations from here, this territory, and he says, "Indigenous procurement is economic reconciliation, an opportunity to heal wounds created by racist, patriarchal legislation gone unchanged for too long." So there's lots of work that has been done. No more studies are needed. I just wanted to say that, like the Royal Commission was very exhaustive starting in 91, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and they have excellent recommendations to do with this. We don't need to rehash those. So how are we doing? Not well. So socioeconomic indicators have been flatlined and in some cases are worse. So if we look at the Corporations Canada report, we see that less than 1% of corporations in Canada that are publicly traded generally have First Nations people, Indigenous people on their boards of directors. So 0.7% and less than 1% of senior staff, that's 0.5% actually, of publicly traded companies in Canada are Indigenous. So Métis, First Nations, and Inuit. The average life expectancy among First Nations people in BC has plummeted and has dropped by more than 6 years between 2017 and 2021. And First Nations unemployment generally has hovered between 10 to 15% unchanged over the last couple decades, and then has been double digit that on reserve. So we just need to look at data. How are we doing? Not very well. So the procurement strategy is not working, and I want to give you a few reasons why. So first of all, and I've heard this, I watched some other recordings, it's easy to fake it, and it's easy to say, hey, pretendians, and kind of focus on that, but that's really not the main problem. It's not the whole system that is pretendians that's causing problems. Current systems and policies encourage corruption and fraud, and of course I have examples of this. And one example is procurement based on Indigenous ownership is common practice for existing non-Indigenous businesses to look and grab an Indigenous equity partner just for the purposes of landing a bid. Another example of that is the GPLP structure, general partner structure, that is used, for example, to make ventures 99% Indigenous owned, but giving 99% of operating powers to non-Indigenous general partners. The standard profit share offered to nations or Indigenous partners is 5%. That's an open secret. And this often results in higher job costs, as that 5% then acts as a tariff or additional tax on contracts and jobs. Critically, there's no active auditing, oversight, or enforcement. So it is common practice for promises to be made in a bid and then not delivered, and there to be no consequences for that. For example, a minimum Indigenous participation within job opportunities. There's the enforcement falls on already stretched nations in what I've seen throughout my career. In my whole career, in my Indigenous heritage and that of my initiative has only ever been audited once, and that was by another First Nations organization. So procurement currently favors legal First Nations governments as well and excludes grassroots entrepreneurs such as myself. So many First Nations then struggling with capacity issues lean heavily on non-Indigenous professionals and suppliers. Conflict of interest is the norm, with non-Indigenous controlling partners putting their interests above that of Indigenous partners' values and priorities. So, problems. Now let's talk solutions.
Sorry, I have to get you to wrap up, Mr. Beaton.
Yes, I'm at the end here. So, thank you for listening. We Indigenous people should be the only arbiters of who is Indigenous and who is not. Indigenous-led is a spectrum. It's easy to define, easy to audit, and easy to score. And Indigenous-led initiatives are proven to create real results and real change on the ground. There's tons of data behind that. And there's precedents, First Nations Management Act, where we have standards, First Nations meet it, and then you have access to preferred rates and opportunities. And
I have to cut you off there, Mr. Beaton, because we need to allow time to get to our meeting. Thanks, Mr. Beaton. I'm sure you'll get an opportunity. Yeah, we'll have you for a full hour, so lots of opportunity to continue.
Yes, I just want to say I welcome questions, so thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Pelche, go ahead, please, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the committee for the invitation. My name is Lauren Pelche. I'm a Senior Economic Advisor to President David Chartrand of the Manitoba Métis Federation, and I join you from the heart of our homeland, Winnipeg. I'm joined in the room there by my colleague, Marc Leclerc, who is the Chief Executive Officer of our affiliate, Métis N4 Construction. As the committee knows, the Red River Métis are a recognized Aboriginal group under Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution, and our people were and continue to be Canada's partners in Confederation. Our people have always been known for our hard work ethic and entrepreneurship, going back to the days of our buffalo hunts. The Manitoba Métis Federation is the national government of our people, as outlined in our Constitution, reflected in our democratic processes, and acknowledged through the Self-Government Recognition and Implementation Agreement signed with Canada in July 2021. I'd like to begin my opening remarks by commending the Government of Canada for introducing the 5% Indigenous procurement mandate in 2021. The policy reflects true and tangible Indigenous reconciliation and has the potential to advance the economic participation of Red River Métis in meaningful ways. While the policy is a good one, the committee is aware of the issues and barriers in its administration and delivery, as heard by others. Our Red River Métis businesses continue to face some of those barriers to participation in Canada's Indigenous procurement. I would suggest to the committee that the Manitoba Métis Federation is prepared and ready to be part of the solution. The committee may not be aware but the Manitoba Métis Federation has its own established Red River Métis business registry and an online Red River Métis business directory administered by our affiliate, the L'Oreal Capital Corporation. Our Red River Métis business directory currently has 770 registered businesses on it. To register, businesses go through a verification of majority ownership process administered by our L'Oreal Capital Corporation, the Manitoba Métis Federation's Indigenous financial institution. And for committee's awareness, the L'Oreal Capital Corporation just celebrated its 32nd anniversary of serving Red River Métis businesses. Through our process, a Red River Métis business owner or owners are equally validated for their citizenship with the Manitoba Métis Federation's Citizenship Registry, which is administered by our Central Registry Office. All businesses on our Red River Métis Business Directory are verified for majority ownership and validated for citizenship with our government. The issue is that our directory is not currently recognized as a valid source for confirming of an Indigenous business by the Government of Canada. As a result, any contracts established between Canada or one of its prime contractors looking to subcontract with the Red River Métis business does not count against the federal department's 5% requirement. The effect is that our Red River Métis businesses are disregarded, not given opportunity, or they are encouraged to register on the federal Indigenous Business Directory. As the committee's aware, the Indigenous Business Directory registration process can be onerous, but more than that, they are already registered on our government directory. So in essence, it becomes a matter of principle pertaining to self-government, self-determination, ensuring that we're positioned to identify and recognize and promote Red River Métis businesses. I would ask that the committee give strong consideration that our Red River Métis Business Directory be recognized as a legitimate source for Indigenous procurement. Thank you again for the invitation. Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. C'est bien apprécié.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's much appreciated.
6-minute rounds with Mr. Genuis. Go ahead, please, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for very interesting and insightful testimony. I want to start with the Manitoba Métis Federation. We are seeing, I think, a lot of false claims made about Indigenous identity, but about Métis identity in particular. There's of course, the recent case of former Minister Boissonnault, but I think there are many other cases. And it seems that when false claims of Indigenous identity are made, very often they're claims of Métis identity in particular. So this might seem obvious, but I think it's important if you could tell the committee directly, what does it mean to be Métis? That is, how is Métis identity properly defined? How can a claim by an individual of Métis identity be verified? And why do you think we're seeing a proliferation of these false claims around Métis identity?
Yes, thank you for the thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thank you for the question.
Okay. Well, in 1870, 10,000 of the 12,000 people in Red River were Métis. There would have been another 2,500 Métis up towards the Qu'Appelle Valley up into Edmonton. Canada was supposed to settle with us with that 1.4 million acres of land that we negotiated, and there were scrip certificates there. And in addition, outside of the postage stamp of Manitoba, there was the Dominions Lands Act, which provided scrip to the Métis and the half-breeds, and it was delivered all around the same time as those numbered treaties were done. So if you want to be on our registry, you got to show either those scrip records or parish records. And so it's a very clear who the Red River Métis are, and it's very clear who they're not. And we've seen all of that in Ontario and Quebec and Eastern Canada. Those people aren't Red River Métis. And so we have our own registries. There's verification systems that are in place. And so, and that's what Lauren was talking about. That's not only for our people, but for our businesses as well. So it's very clear who we are and also who's not Métis. And important question.
So anyone claiming to be Métis who is actually Métis should have a fairly easy time providing the evidence through the process that you've just
Yeah,
described.
we use the St. Boniface
Yes.
Historical Society, and all of the families are connected. We know who our families are, and we know who they're not.
Sometimes we hear liberals in particular say, "Oh, it's so complicated. It's really complicated to know what's going on." But basically, what you're saying is it's not complicated.
It's not complicated.
Okay. The I wanted to ask as well about this issue of the business list. You've got various rights holders that are maintaining their own lists. Meanwhile, the government has said, no, we're going to have our own separate list. And there are people that are not on that list who are actually Indigenous businesses. There are people who are on that list who are not Indigenous businesses. It seems to me that, again, this is one of those things that gets called complicated when it's fairly simple. Can't the government, instead of creating its own list, simply say we are going to have a mechanism where those doing procurement can see the lists that we recognize? So legitimate nations have their own lists. We look at their lists. Organizations that credibly represent Indigenous peoples, they're producing lists. And rather than duplicating this work or choosing only one list, the government simply has the ability to see who's on everybody else's lists. And that's the basis of deciding who's an Indigenous business. Wouldn't that be a lot simpler?
Yeah, it would be a lot simpler. And that's,
Yep.
I was here
can
when
add.
Ron Irwin introduced this procurement strategy, and it wasn't very effective for a lot of years. And then when the government came in and put in targets and timetables, it started to work. But it was also, the problem was that database of businesses was contaminated right from the start. And the fact that the minister said that there's 1,100 that they just kicked out of the database says something about that database as a whole. So what we did in the United States, what happened in the United States is they created these sector councils. It was Nixon that brought in Section 8A, the business and procurement requirements for minorities in the States, and they created 49 different business councils that do verification of companies. We brought in the Canadian Aboriginal Minority Supplier Council. We were there when we set it up, and it does verification of minority businesses and Indigenous businesses. So there's a way to self-regulate it, and Lauren has a point of view on this that's important. Lauren?
Yeah, I'll just weigh in very briefly, Mark, and Mr. Chair, that the point I would make is, out of my opening remarks, really there's two fundamental questions. One is verification of majority ownership, and that can be, I'll say any party with rights to that company information can determine that. It's really on the validation piece related to identity, related to connectivity to a given Indigenous nation. And that validation process, in my view, sits best when it's connected with a self-governing Indigenous government like the Manitoba Métis Federation.
Yeah, I guess the point is, though, the government doesn't have to do this work of even, taking other people's lists and putting it together themselves. They could just say that at the point of procurement, we have a mechanism for accessing all of the lists. And is that on a list? Whose list is it on? Can we verify that it's on, that it's a real Indigenous business because it's on a real list? This seems so simple, and yet it's being called complicated. Thanks.
Sorry, Mr. Baines, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. I wanted to talk a little bit about and maybe I can direct this to any of the guests who'd like to maybe share a little bit answers in one by one. The 5% minimum target for Indigenous businesses, a lot of it was in response to calls from First Nations, Inuit, and Métis business leaders. If you can maybe express how important it is and how it's being received within the nations that you're mostly working with, and other Indigenous leaders that you're working with. What message does this send to Indigenous communities from the federal government?
I think the 5% minimum is one thing, but we negotiated with the Skyline, the Air Force training contract, which is a 25-year contract. we negotiated 15% of the construction. So it's not just, the minimum is important, but it's not a ceiling either. And so we think that this project can be improved, should be improved, but it's all in how it gets done. And it's Mr. Genio's question about verifying who is and who is not in Indigenous business is critical to the success of that program, and it should be built into the overall procurement system.
Okay, and maybe if anybody else wants to share.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Beaton.
Sorry, Mr. Peltier. So it's incredibly important. I mean, the worst thing that could happen, Mr. Baines, is that that the government could go, hey, it's broken, it's not working, so let's just stop. Let's not do it anymore, because that's been the history for us, is that non-First Nations, non-Indigenous institutions make mistakes with First Nations and Indigenous programs and projects and say, see, it doesn't work, let's not do it anymore. That's not the right path forward. The right path forward is to take these kind of baby steps forward and start turning them into adult steps and start to get towards actual reconciliation, where we're starting to move the needle, where we start looking at the data and we start seeing that there are more Indigenous peoples involved in the economy of this country. Where we start seeing that, you know what solves food insecurity? The rampant food insecurity of First Nations, jobs. Jobs go a long way to feeding children. 50% of whom in BC are food insecure. So we don't want to step backward. We want to step forward, and we want to work together. And I think that's a pretty universal sentiment. Thank you.
And we've heard from officials talk about, again, like you said, it's not the ceiling. So we've heard in certain departments that there has been more than just the 5%. So maybe we, finally on the same question, we can hear from Mr. Leclerc?
I think Mark asked
Mr.
Baines, but I'm happy. Thank you. I'm happy to add. The 5% mandate has been exceptionally well received by Red River Métis businesses and our community. It's now a question of access to opportunity. Next week we're hosting a business expo, 275 attendees, connecting Red River Métis businesses with Government of Canada departments, PSPC, prime contractors that have contracts with the federal government who have inherited that 5% mandate, and we're exceptionally excited about it, and it will change lives for us.
Okay, and maybe one question. I'll stay with you, Mr. Peltier. In your view, who's best placed to determine if business should be eligible to compete for contracts through the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses? And we've talked a lot about the lists and who should be on the list and these sorts of things. If you can maybe express something.
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Baines. To me, there's a need for clarity. I think previous committee member asked this question about who makes a determination of who holds the list and who authorizes the lists and who legitimizes or validates the list holders. I think that's at the crux of it. It's now a shift from the list themselves to the authorizations around list holders. And I think that's where we're coming in from a Manitoba Métis Federation perspective, which is as a self-governing nation with a well-established business directory, verified, validated. We're looking for that step of that acknowledgement by Canada to say, yes, we recognize that the list holder is solid. As an Indigenous government, the list holder is solid from a process perspective. And I think that's going to be the next step that's needed to be taken to ensure, again, to the previous committee members' points, the federal department procurement officer who's looking at that contract and looking at who to contract with has access to that. That's been pre-established by or a recognized list of business directory holders.
Okay, and just quickly,
real quick, Mr. Baines.
Yeah, just very quickly, do you think that businesses, indigenous businesses, are aware widely? Is it widely known that this is available, this program?
In our Red River Métis business community, it's very well known. It's very well
Okay,
known.
thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Chair.
Baines. We'll go to Mrs. Vignola for 6 minutes, then we'll suspend to vote.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll give everybody time to get their earpieces on and so on. Thank you. Mr. Leclerc, Mr. Pelletier, on November 16. It was the 139th anniversary of a very sad event. I wanted to really mention it, and to the Métis community, all of my support in the celebration that you held for the hanging of Mr. Riel. And you know that in Quebec, to quote a former premier, we as we say in French, jappé fort, which means we spoke out very strongly against it because he was being treated like a dog. So my first question will be for Mr. Beaton, but you can complete each other's answers because I know that you have your own ideas, also different ideas. Mr. Beaton, you said that sometimes it's necessary for Indigenous businesses to enter into agreements with non-Indigenous companies for financial considerations, essentially. And that's something we've heard in the past, a liquidity issue, for example. And that's in part because of the Indian Act, which means that on-reserve businesses have a lot of more difficulty getting funding from traditional banks. My first question, how can we ensure that Indigenous businesses can really play a role in contracts obtained when they enter into agreements with non-Indigenous businesses, both in terms of tasks that need to be done, the work that needs to be done, and also the profits? How can it be fair?
Thank you for the question. That is an excellent question. You've somewhat answered it by pointing out the problems that exist in accessing capital, which in our survey through our nonprofit association, our network, access to capital, in other words, being able to go to a bank and get a loan, is the number one problem, followed closely by access to land. And then thirdly, having trained people. What has happened since I was a child is the promise that was made in partnerships with non-Indigenous parties is that they were temporary and they would be training the next generation of First Nations or Indigenous people to sort of take their place. What I've seen over my lifetime is that is an empty promise that has not happened. So the problems you're laid out could be solved through policy. So Indian Act is the parts of it that are very restrictive are often no longer enforced, and institutions can make decisions that are very progressive through policy changes, including the government, that open the doors to access to capital, for example. And I have seen that. I've gone to battle with banks and seen major policy shifts that have opened those doors. I am status Indian. I live off reserve, and it's still very, very difficult for me to get financing because that section of the Indian Act is constantly held as an excuse on why I can't access financing, even though my assets are all off reserve. And then lastly, we need to move to Indigenous led as a way, as a standard, where we have Indigenous people making the decisions on a daily basis. That is the definition of Indigenous led, because if we continue to allow all the space for non-Indigenous controlling interests to make the daily decisions, what we see is Indigenous peoples are not given space and opportunities to advance and take those jobs and positions within those initiatives and contracts and opportunities. Thank you.
Merci. Je vais y aller
Thank you. I'll be quick with two more questions that seem short, but that I feel like will lead to longer responses. And I will take time later also to get more information. In terms of tools, financial tools and levers, we're starting to see something put in place to support Indigenous businesses. These are tools coming from Indigenous communities to ensure their development and their autonomy. How could the government better support these initiatives in order to ensure better visibility of these measures within the communities? And secondly, quickly, how does the Indian Act, or how could the Indian Act be amended to ensure the autonomy of communities instead of, I don't know, locking them up? I don't have any other words to diminish them. I don't know exactly how to put it, what to say about that act. I'll start with Mr. Leclerc, and then I'll take my 2.5 minutes later for more information.
About 15 seconds to solve the Indian Act issue, Mr. Leclerc. Go ahead.
Well, the Indian Act is not our issue, but it does create some restrictions. I do know, though, the important part about this policy is making sure the government enforces it. So, for example, we negotiated a building for Skyline here. They took 100 offices from us. It was okay for us to go to the bank and get the $7 million to buy the building because we have a guaranteed tenant. And so that's why and National Defense actually did intervene and make sure that Skyline is answering the mail on their commitments for procurement. So we know it works, but it's operational as well.
To catch you off there, we're going to suspend and then vote. And once we're all voted and confirmed, we'll gavel back in. Thank you. When we are back, we're going to go straight to Mr. Backrack. I'm not sure if we're going to have more bells before we're done, but in case we do, I'll just give everyone a heads up and we'll
I'm happy to
repeat the
keep
process.
talking until the next vote if
Oh,
you'd
that'd
like,
be,
Mr.
yeah, why
Chair.
don't we just do that? Go ahead for the rest of the session, Mr. Backrack. Go ahead, sir. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and it's good to be back at this committee with folks, and thanks to our witnesses for shedding light on this issue that we're studying. I'm really pleased to have Mr. Beaton here from Northwest BC, someone who has a lot of experience as an Indigenous business person and has thought a lot about this question of how we ensure that Indigenous businesses are getting more and more opportunities and that we're addressing some of the real injustices in Indigenous procurement that have persisted for a long time, as he mentioned in his opening remarks. I know, Mr. Beaton, when you got to the solutions part, you ran out of time a little bit. So I wanted to just give you an opportunity to talk about your proposals when it comes to fixing the shortcomings that you listed. And perhaps if you could focus in on these questions around the pragmatic issues of defining what an Indigenous business is and this idea of for Indigenous, by Indigenous, that I think is really crucial in addressing the problems that we've seen in the Indigenous procurement system. So I'm happy to just give you the remaining minutes to expand on those ideas and help the committee understand where we go from here.
Sure. Thank you, Taylor, for the question and giving me a bit more time to talk about that. As I said, that we Indigenous people should be the only judges and arbiters of who's Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And I've heard that from my Métis friends here as well, that they have a solution. We have a solution. We know who's Indigenous and who's not. We know who's First Nations and who's not, and it's pretty easy. As the previous Métis speakers have talked about, it's not complicated. Indigeneity is not a complicated thing. Every single First Nations person who is knows where they're from and is claimed by nation, that is who you are. First Nations or Indigenous. That's all it is. You know, like who's your ancestors and do they know about you? and the next thing I want to talk about that's really critical is that the Indigenous ownership piece, of course, that's important, but it's only one piece of being an Indigenous company or business or party. And it's a very small piece because there's actually 5 critical pieces around being Indigenous led. But the simple definition of Indigenous led is that if Indigenous people are making the decisions at every level of an organization, those are going to be Indigenous decisions. They're going to be aligned with Indigenous values and perspectives, and they're going to benefit the community. They're going to create local jobs. They're going to create jobs for other Indigenous people and opportunities to advance. But the Indigenous-led standard is not embraced anywhere in federal government that I've come across. And so the solution is essentially that we need the Indigenous-led standard to be embraced as the standard rather than Indigenous ownership. And then those that are establishing the standard and even conducting audits are us, our organizations, our Indigenous-led, authentic organizations. And then we're going to see things change, because that should be the only test. Is that the whole reason we're here talking about Indigenous procurement is that there's historical injustices that have completely marginalized Indigenous people in this country out of the economy, and we're trying to fix that. And we need to fix it, guys. Like we're in this boat together. Canada needs workers. We need strong businesses. We have them in our Indigenous population, and we're available and ready. So this is like a win-win-win. Everybody wins. So why aren't we having this conversation? Why aren't we engaged in talking about these meaningful groundswell shifts that are actually going to create jobs? So the last thing I'll say, Taylor, is that like it's been proven globally that, you know, like Indigenous peoples globally are stewarding 82% of the world's remaining biodiversity. That's what Indigenous-led does on less than 1% of the world's resources. The same thing happens economically when Indigenous people are in charge. We create the jobs locally. You know, we benefit the local economy, and you have this huge multiplier effect. So everybody wins, but we need to be the ones at the steering wheel, and we need to be the ones driving it, and then we'll actually see those needles move. So thank you for listening to me on that one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beaton. And I wanted to ask one more question. I know we have one more minute, but this piece around Indigenous led, it's something that we've heard the government aspire to. For instance, there was a commitment to a by Indigenous, for Indigenous housing strategy that came with significant financial resources, and yet we haven't seen any of those resources actually roll out several years after the original commitment. Where do you think the government goes off the rails when it comes to empowering Indigenous organizations and Indigenous governance with these decisions around shaping programs and distributing resources? Where does it fall apart?
It falls apart in not handing over the reins to an Indigenous, authentic, effective, organization early on. And so those processes I've been involved with, I've seen these federal budget announcements that are, say, $30-50 million for, one sector of the Indigenous economy. And by the time it actually hits the ground, it's been whittled down to $1 million. By the time it actually gets to the authentic Indigenous organizations, that's what I've witnessed is, more studies. That's why I said in my opening remarks, we don't need to do any more studies. We don't need any more data. The data's there. We just need to get to work. And we just need to have the steering wheel. We need our turn to solve our own problems. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're right on time. Thanks very much. We'll go to Mr. Genuis, please.
Thank you. First of all, I wonder if folks from the Manitoba Métis Federation could provide us with any reaction to what happened with Randy Boissonneau, former cabinet minister, false claims about Indigenous identity, Métis identity, and now has left cabinet but remains a member of the Liberal caucus. Any reaction to those events that you want to share?
Well, I think President Chartrand addressed that in a CBC interview the other day, and what we know is who the real Métis are, the Red River Métis, and I don't think he ever claimed to be part of the Red River Métis. So, the challenge with this is the self-identification issue, and it's writ large in the federal public service. You just got to say you identify as Indigenous, and then Bob's your uncle. And so we've always had issues with that, not only on the procurement side, but on the employment side. So it really behooves the government and this committee, actually, because I'm glad you're looking at these issues, because it really does need some oversight in order to implement these policies, but also to police the policies. And so I think the self-identification thing, I think, really needs to be looked at closely.
It's not at all surprising that if you have a self-identification framework that you're going to have a certain portion of people who are unscrupulous enough to self-identify as whatever they perceive to be in their interest to self-identify as in the moment. That's fairly obvious. I wanted to go to enforcement now. Mr. Beaton made some interesting, I think, important comments about enforcement, highlighting the fact that there are the most publicized cases of people that are outright making false claims of Indigenous identity, the Randy Boissonneau case, for example. But there are likely many more claims of deceptive structures. So it's not actually a person who is not Indigenous saying they're Indigenous. It's more a case of a structure that is designed to partially incorporate an Indigenous company, but in a way that preserves all of the benefit for the non-Indigenous side of that partnership. And then also, Mr. Beaton made the point about a lack of audits, that claims might be made about Indigenous benefits or about how that information, that sort of benefit sharing, work sharing process is going to unfold that are not followed through on and are not enforced. So I wonder if we could get both witness groups to comment on the failure to enforce some of these rules, why there's a lack of enforcement, who should be enforcing it, and how we can improve enforcement specifically.
Lauren, you want to take that one?
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to provide a response. In terms of enforcement, again, coming back to my earlier points about who authorizes lists or who validates lists, and then how are those lists made available to decision makers, federal decision makers in procurement. There has to be a regime that looks at that in terms of making a determination of the list holder and the process that in which they use to verify and validate. Along with that regime comes that back end piece that you're speaking about, which is how are each of the different groups or the government of Canada going to look at the enforcement component, whether that's audit post contracting or whether that's ensuring that the right criteria or conditions are met again by the list administrators going forward. And I think more generally speaking, on some of these fraudulent activities, we're already seeing the legal action, legal consequences. To Mark's point about self-ID.
Yeah, sorry. Can I just jump in? I do want to give some time to Mr. Beaton on this just briefly, but there's a real discrepancy where you have, on the one hand, 1,100 businesses taken off the list, but on the other hand, you have 0 cases of consequences or penalties for those who engage in Indigenous identity fraud. So there's clearly a problem, but there's no penalties for anyone who is responsible for the problem. Mr. Beaton, do you want to just comment on how we can improve enforcement?
Extremely briefly,
Yeah, I mean,
please.
audits, absolutely. Done by Indigenous people, very simple. And just keep in mind that the current system is a yes/no in terms of meeting an ownership or certain percentage requirements. Indigenous leads a spectrum, so it's not just a simple yes/no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Atwin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I hope I'm coming through loud and clear for interpretation. So thank you again for our witnesses for adding very important testimony to this conversation today. It's been very enlightening for sure. I'd love to go back to Mr. Pelletier around the list again, and that the organization kind of monitors. Can you speak about has that process evolved since it began, or it's been pretty standard across the board?
Yeah, thank you very much, Atwin, for the question. The process has evolved. We continue to bring more rigor over the past several years, increased integrity. Obviously, there's review of the registry as we move forward. Given that you may see instances where there's a change in ownership, natural part of business transaction. You might see some change in citizenship. So we're monitoring that on an ongoing basis. I would say what's really interesting and really exciting about the list is we use it to inform our own Red River Métis equitable participation policy and program. We've used it in our major contracts that we've issued out to, the MMF has done major contracts with non-Métis businesses who have the capacity to undertake it. And then through that, there's a process by which they can use our directory to support suppliers, subcontractors, etc. And I'll just say that on a recent $11.5 million energy efficiency retrofit project, our general contractor was Red River Métis. 17 of 22 subcontractors were Métis. We had a 28% on-site workforce Red River Métis participation. It's substantive. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's a perfect example of kind of how this is supposed to work, and so that's really great to hear. And do you think that transferring the list of Indigenous businesses away from government would address concerns, perhaps that we're seeing with organizations such as the Métis Nation of Ontario?
So right now there are 6 Red River Métis businesses on the federal Indigenous Business Directory. They've secured some contracts in the past, but it's been limited. Some have been on that list from, I'll say, early days, have not seen contracts. Some are being directed there, as per my opening remarks, to because they're working. We've introduced them to prime contractors with, in one case, a prime contractor that's got $3 billion worth of federal defense contracting. We've introduced them to a Red River Métis business. They're excited. They have the capability to do what they need them to do. They've said, we're ready to go into contract mode as soon as you get registered on the federal Indigenous Business Directory, which to me goes against the principle of the fact that they're registered with our government's registry.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Beaton, if I could turn to you as well. I think your business sounds, really incredible. Again, addressing some important issues, and especially as you said, as it relates to some of the oppressive kind of pieces of the Indian Act, specifically around, food security and kind of the limitations there. Can you just speak to some of the ways that your businesses maybe helped improve the economic activity in communities in your region?
Absolutely. Thank you for giving me that space. Our first year of operations, so we're Indigenous led, meaning our board's Indigenous, our senior staff are Indigenous, our medium staff, our entry level staff, our majority Indigenous at every level. Our first year, we work in skills training, so primarily trades. And I'm not an educator by background, I'm an entrepreneur. And I just saw, hey, there's all these construction sites and all this stuff going on. And we're surrounded by unemployed First Nations people. Why is nobody working, in these areas? And I was a general contractor for a while, where I proved it could be done, just like my co-witness here. Anyway, so I just wanted to say, our first year, we engaged more Indigenous people in trades in our province than all non-Indigenous institutions that were government funded put together. And that was just our first year. We've grown every single year. Now, one of the questions I didn't get asked is if I'm on the registry and if I've ever attempted to bid. And the funny thing is, I used to be, but guess what? My status card expired. And that's a huge problem here. Like a lack of ID in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities is a really big problem. And that's why I'm not on it. I'm status. I'm definitely Indigenous. I'm First Nations. You'll find tens of thousands of people who will attest to my indigeneity and my ancestors here. And yet I'm not on the registry because I've got an expired status card, which is absolutely ridiculous. So anyways, I just thought, the success is big. If anyone wants to check us out, it's Tea Creek, the tea that you drink, creek.ca is our website. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And that's really informative as well.
That's our time, I'm afraid. We're past our time.
Sorry. Well, thank you very much.
Mrs. Vignola, and then we'll finish with Mr. Backrack.
Monsieur Beaton,
Mr. Beaton, I'm still surprised. That's the best word I can find, to learn that status card can expire. I'm sorry, but I think that's a problem. It's as if somebody told me that my birth certificate just expired. I mean, I just don't know what to say. It's ridiculous. Well, apologies. Apologies for the microphone to the interpreters. I want to come back to something you said, Mr. Beaton. You said we have enough studies. Do you sometimes get the impression that repeated consultations, repeated studies are just a way to look good in front of the cameras and to just punt real resolutions, real problem solving down the road? I mean, we've had studies for 50 years. Can we finally understand something, fix a problem? Is that how you see all those studies also?
Yeah, 100%. I think we're in agreement that universally studies are important, but they've been done. We've got lots of data from, for example, Statistics Canada that comes out fairly regularly. And like I said, we just need to get going. There's tons of window dressing. My experience and the experience of all the First Nations we work with is that reconciliation's all talk, no action currently. Like we're not seeing the needle really moving in significant ways. And that's really all I have to say on it. Like, we're ready for action. Our Métis allies there are working hard. We're working hard too. We're ready to go. And we're just not having the meaningful partners in our case on the other side that are ready to go to.
très rapidement, les outils.
Very quickly, the financial tools and levers that are being put in place by First Nations for First Nations, how can the government, one, consolidate their importance, and two, make sure those tools and levers are better known in Indigenous communities, no matter what their geographical situation is throughout the country?
Time is left for a response, but we always welcome written submissions. If you'd like to provide a commentary in writing to the clerk, that'd be much appreciated. We'll go to Mr. Backrack, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Beaton, as you know, I had a chance to ride the train from Prince George to Smithers a few weeks back, and was riding with a young man named Justice Moore, who shared with me how his life has been transformed by the work that you're doing at Tea Creek. And I wanted to give this last round to you to just talk about what you're doing with your operation with Tea Creek, and some of the successes that you've had in terms of training and empowering local Indigenous people with the skills that they need to succeed. You have 2.5 minutes. Share with us the story of Tea Creek and how it's been so transformational.
Thank you. Well, I decided to put all my business experience to work in terms of trying to transform. My vision of Tea Creek is a healthy, resilient Indigenous economies across the country and beyond, based around abundant local food, which is our history. Our past is our future is how I sum up Tea Creek. That's the vision. And then the nuts and bolts is retraining our people to take those places within our economy from top to bottom. So there's an excellent documentary on CBC about Tea Creek. You just go on CBC Gem and look for Tea Creek, and you'll find it if you're really interested in solutions that work, and what we're doing up here. So I just want to, again, thank everybody very, very much for having us, and for having me, and for listening. And I really do look forward to seeing some positive changes, and hopefully hearing from folks on the federal side who want to see Indigenous-led take root and become a new standard that opens the door to more opportunities and resources that actually make a difference on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Mr. Beaton. And we have 30 more seconds, so I'm going to try to fit in one more question, and it's this. You talked about handing Indigenous people the wheel, that it's time for the government to really empower Indigenous people when it comes to Indigenous procurement. Are the existing Indigenous organizations and Indigenous governing bodies sufficient to lead that work, or is there a need for the creation of new institutions or organizations or groupings to administer the process of distributing contracts and managing Indigenous procurement? Look,
well,
we can follow up after the chairs.
Yeah, Mr. Beat, I apologize. There's no time, but again, like previously, we would really welcome a written response or some thoughts on that question. With that, colleagues, we'll suspend and we'll bring in our new witnesses. Thanks for everyone's patience. We'll go opening statements. Welcome back, witnesses. We're having some technical issues with Mr. Sergier, so we're going to continue with our in-person opening statements while we try and get his IT fixed, and we'll go to him third. And if not, then we'll just go straight to questionings. Mr. Carrigan, would you like to go ahead first for 5 minutes? I'm going to keep you both to 5 minutes, no further, please, because we're short on time as it is.
I'll be as quick as I can. So thank you, committee, for the opportunity to come back and speak again. I'd like to just acknowledge that I was at a different meeting today in Toronto. We're supposed to be with the Bank of Montreal's Indigenous Advisory Committee, and they gave me leave to be here today because of the importance of the subject for communities across Canada. My name is Denis Carignan, or Dennis Carrigan. I'm president of Plato Testing. We're an IT services company with about 400 employees across Canada. I have to ask myself kind of why I'm here, right? And what am I presenting today? Because I've presented once before. And I thought back to my mother, who, her name is Leona Sear, and Leona Carrigan. She went to the LeBret Indian Residential School for 12 years, along with all of her brothers and sisters. And the one thing that she taught me was that she acknowledged the past and recognized the past, but always looked to the future and lived in the present. And what that taught me over the course of my life was to check my intentions when presenting. And I thought to myself, why am I here today? And it's really so that I can present my experience as a business person in Canada, running an IT services company over the last 9 years. And hopefully some of our experiences and some of our learnings can be shared and can help inform the work of this committee, because the work that you do, the work that the government does, is important for us. The Government of Canada is the largest purchaser of goods and services in Canada. So therefore, how it manages procurement is very, very important, and is very, very important as a tool, a policy tool of incentivizing and helping to, I guess, make good things happen for all Canadians. I guess I also acknowledge that as a business person, I can't change the policy, and that you here collectively and the work that you do in Parliament, you're the ones that have the power to influence and make these changes. And we're here because previous policy was put in place almost 30 years ago, and the policy doesn't work for today's standards. And I heard some of the testimony this morning, and I was very grateful to see Lauren Peltier, a former colleague of mine, speak with great earnestness and a lot of wisdom. And I'm hearing a lot of commonalities from what presentation this morning to what we have to say as well. My business is technology. We work in a technology workspace. We compete globally. We work with companies across Canada, government organizations across Canada. And collectively, what we've been trying to do is to work to build careers for Indigenous Canadians in technology. When I consider and I look at some of the demographics for our industry, anywhere from 0.5% to 1.5% of Canada's Indigenous technology workforce is Indigenous. And yet there's great opportunity to grow careers. And when I look at previous work that I did as a public servant, one of the challenges we have is how do we diversify economies in our local communities. And the nice thing about technology is the work is portable. So if we invest the time and the energy and equip people with skills, work can be brought to different parts of Canada and actually help diversify the work that they do. I have shared a document which probably isn't through translation yet, provides a bit of an overview of who we are as a company and some of the impacts that we have. One of the pages depicts a case study of our work in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. We received some funding from the Government of Canada through FedNor, through the Provincial Government of Ontario, and through the City of Sault Ste. Marie, totaling a little over $3 million. And that funding was provided over 5 years. And with those organizations and with Crown Corporations and a number of private corporations in Sault Ste. Marie, we've been able to develop a work center there. And to date, we've generated over $11 million in salaries and benefits through to our Indigenous team in that community, generating about 400 months of employment. And, I guess even as a business person, however, it looks to me like it's a pretty good return on investment for everyone. And when I think about it, you wouldn't think of Sault Ste. Marie necessarily as being a hub of technology or technology employment. And yet, with the proper investment of time and effort, incentives, we can do this in virtually every community in Canada where there is adequate infrastructure. So I will hopefully provide some recommendations to you. I know I've got just a few seconds left, but I think the first one is to provide incentives for capacity building or building of a talent pipeline in Canada, something very important. And I think that that's something that can be done inside of a renewed procurement program. And the second one is really around building business acumen. We're a company that's almost 30 years old, but to compete on a federal government procurement project, we need to be bigger and we need to be more capable. And the only way for us to scale to that is actually to have an opportunity to actually lead projects as opposed to being a subcontractor on projects. So with that, I will close it, and I thank you again for the opportunity.
Thanks. Welcome back, Ms. Samaginas. I know I'm butchering your name. I apologize. Thank you for making the effort to drive so far to be here again today. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Crystal Samaginas, and I'm a leader of the Ghostwire Society, which is a grassroots collective made up, and I'm wearing this shirt for a reason because it's indicative of Inuit, First Nations, and Métis, and that is exactly who we represent. My involvement in this committee came as a result of my dedication to stopping First Nations, Métis, Inuit identity fraud. When we look at the issue, the specific issue of Indigenous and procurement, what we are doing is we are trying to unravel centuries of colonial interference in who we are as a people. And some of those mechanisms, these frameworks, whether they be the Indian Act, legislation, procurement systems, these programs that are meant to bridge gaps that currently exist for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, there are flaws. And what we have is we are wading through a quagmire of exploitations, historical exploitations, and they are crippling my people from a grassroots perspective. There's been much talk of data. There is a data deficit on the impact of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit identity fraud on our people as we experience it in our day-to-day life. They are robbing us of opportunities, of resource building, of capacity building, and of true engagement and our true place in the economies, social and otherwise, in Canadian society. We are a very capable, intelligent, resourceful, beneficial, beautiful nation. We are the First Peoples. We are the stewards of our resources and of Mother Earth. And we are here to say that work with us. Work with us when we tell you that this business is not representative of us. I'm here to tell you about CPAINS. That acronym stands for Corporations Posing as Indigenous Nations. We are doing data collection among our people to say that this is how it's impacting us. From the top 10 Indigenous businesses that have done procurement in recent years, of those top 10 businesses, the dollar sign, the price tag, for those who are fraudulently claiming Indigenous identity to engage in procurement, the price tag is $2,610,800,000. That figure alone could have alleviated food insecurity in the North. It could have provided clean drinking water for every First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who currently does not have clean drinking water. It could have alleviated child welfare problems across this country. When you put these kinds of price tags and you look and you study the data and you present it, these are the real impacts on our people, and you tell us that these are the colonial mechanisms that are going to rule us, and you do not listen to us when we are telling you these people are not Indigenous. This is an exploitation that's billions of dollars, and you are robbing my people of our true place in this society, because we are more than capable of being your equal partner. We are more than capable of handling the natural resources and being stewards of Mother Earth. And we are here to say enough. The Ghost Warrior Society is not going anywhere. And we are going to continue our work. We are going to continue our work, and we're going to continue these relationships and these opportunities to educate on the real colonial violence that is First Nations, Métis, and Inuit identity fraud. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have Mr. Surgery's IT fix, so we're going to go ahead if we're able to address it.
Things should be okay now, hopefully. Maybe you can try.
Oh, well, actually, we'll, and maybe fix. Mr. Surgery, are you there, please?
Yes, I am.
Why don't you go ahead for go ahead for 5 minutes, please, for your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Kwe, bonjour, good day. My name is Dave Sergerie. I am Anishinaabe from Temiskaming First Nation. I've been working for the Assembly of First Nations Quebec-Labrador for the past 23 years, and I'm currently Strategic Projects Coordinator for the AFNQL's Economic Development Commission in support of 43 First Nation communities in Quebec. Thank you for having me here today. In the next few minutes, I will quickly address a certain number of issues regarding Indigenous procurement. Should you wish to further discuss any topics, my contact information is available on our website. Indigenous businesses are primarily small to medium size, so a lot of them are active mainly in their local market and have neither the interest nor the capacity to open up to the outside world, to canvass for contracts, or to participate in calls for tenders. Please remember this opening statement when we come to address some of the constraints and solutions specific to Indigenous procurement. First, let's take a quick look at the reasons behind this tendency to have smaller businesses. Indigenous people have a worldview that is very much rooted in the present moment. They don't project much into the future, and the same is true for entrepreneurs. They want to be able to provide for their families, create quality jobs, and provide essential services to local residents. Additionally, First Nation entrepreneurs are faced with socioeconomic realities and barriers that often prevent them from working 60, 70 hours a week away from their families. All the ambition in the world cannot eliminate the harsh conditions faced by many community residents and entrepreneurs. In terms of constraints and solutions, I will first address the capacity level. Not all Indigenous businesses have the capacity to carry out high-value contracts. The lack of human and financial resources makes it difficult, even for experienced and competent business owners, to comply with the heavy regulation constraints of certain activity sectors such as construction. And furthermore, because First Nations businesses are smaller and face additional challenges, their tenders tend to be higher than those of non-Indigenous businesses, thus preventing them from winning contracts. On this last point, we recommend greater flexibility in the criteria for awarding contracts so as to put Indigenous and non-Indigenous businesses on a more equal footing. However, as a more general solution, we recommend that government buyers largely increase the use of low-value contracting, which, as you know, have a upper limit of $25,000 for goods and $40,000 for services. Because these contracts can be awarded without going through the tendering process, this approach has tremendous potential in the context of procurement from Indigenous businesses. By landing $25,000 contracts, businesses can continue to grow, hire employees, develop their expertise. Additionally, this type of lower value contract allows them to familiarize themselves with the process of government contracting, and as they start to see the concrete benefits of it all, their confidence in the process and in government will naturally increase, thus setting a positive example for their peers. Implementing this proposed solution presents its own difficulties. For one, low-value contracts can be less attractive for a government from a government point of view, as they require a lot more work on the whole than larger value contracts, while contributing less to the achievement of the 5% target. As a result, they might not be sufficiently valued and promoted within the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses. In terms of attractiveness, the first aspect I want to talk about is the weight of history. Obviously, Indigenous people have seen many government-led initiatives never materialize. A certain mistrust has set in with regard to governments in general. The procurement process is also largely unknown to contractors, and it is a complex process in the eyes of many of them, and in which it is difficult to qualify. Indigenous entrepreneurs need to be supported so that they can more easily navigate the procurement process by restoring their confidence in the process, by showing them concrete examples of contracts that have been awarded to Indigenous businesses. It could convince entrepreneurs that the time is worth investing.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, that is our 5 minutes. I have to cut you off there in order to get our rounds in. We will be able to get the first round in before we have to vote, but I have to cut everyone off right at 6 minutes, so watch your clocks, please. Mr. Generalist, go ahead, please, sir.
Thank you, Chair. First, Ms. Semagenis, thank you for coming here again, and thank you for really exposing us to the human cost of this procurement abuse. Sometimes I think the temptation around here is when big numbers are thrown out to just see the numbers, and we need to see the lost opportunity behind every misappropriation of funds. This is cultural appropriation leading to financial misappropriation, and that financial misappropriation has real consequences. I wonder if you can share your reaction to the Randy Boissonneau affair, and particularly what we can learn from what happened, not just what happened in the past, but what we should take from what took place and use going forward.
I think that entire situation is indicative of what happens when you have absolutely no deterrence for claiming Indigenous identity falsely. When you have absolutely no mechanisms in place to affirm these, then you have exploitations. I find this an exploitation. It is very common of the cases that we research in our work, our volunteer work. We do this work with no resources. So when you have high-placed people making those false claims of First Nations, Métis, Inuit identity, and they hold significant political power, then that makes that exploitation exponentially harmful. And it is a trauma to us to uncover these things, to see these things exposed in the media, and then to go back over that grift and see, what has this person been involved in? Where did they divert resources that should have gone to our people? How is this, why does this happen? Why is this allowed to happen? How, we need deterrence. We need frameworks and we need dispute mechanisms, in place when we challenge a business. We tried to research Indigenous procurement. There is very little information, even in researching government databases, to authenticate these businesses. There's walls everywhere. It's.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up question? You talked about deterrence, about consequences. Do you think he should remain in the Liberal caucus or not?
No.
Sorry, could you say that one more time?
No, I do not believe he should be. That's a significant breach to trust. Yeah. It's a misrepresentation, and that the Liberals are serious about engagement and transparency with the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. Then they have people who represent that in their highest halls of representation.
Okay, thank you. I want to proceed to our other two witness groups who are, I think, talking in a similar way about the other barriers that exist for Indigenous businesses. And just reflecting on this, if on the one hand the government says they want Indigenous procurement, but if they make procurement opportunities hard to access for new businesses, small businesses, businesses in rural areas, businesses run by people without political connections, then you are going to have low numbers in practice, even if maybe the government tries to massage the numbers in various ways. So do you agree with that assessment in general? And what are the steps we can take to ensure that procurement is more accessible for new businesses, small businesses, businesses located outside of the national capital, businesses run by people without political connections, so that we're truly democratizing the process here. Maybe Mr. Carrington first, and then we'll go online.
Thank you, Mr. Janis. Well, part of the challenge in our sector is that, I think I alluded to it, that there's just not a large population of Indigenous IT professionals in the country. There are a number of businesses that I think are listed as IT professional businesses, but I can't speak to the numbers of employees that they have that are actually technical, that are doing the jobs. What's the best way to do it? The best way, obviously, is to get more businesses in the space. The question is, how do you get more businesses in the space with people that have the skills? And part of the challenge is that building skills, it takes time. So we, as a company, looked at this and said, well, we'd like to go and hire all the Indigenous IT graduates we can find, and we realized there just aren't enough. So what we decided to do is to build our own. So we developed a training program, and we've been spending the last 9 years, investing in people to try and build this workforce and grow it. And in terms of how can this process benefit that, is if the rules can be structured so that incentives are built in for companies, be they Indigenous or non-Indigenous, to actually invest in people. So capacity development. And I don't mean just training, I also mean jobs and careers.
I do want to give a moment to our colleague online, but just to say I really agree with and affirm the importance of that point you made about that talent pipeline. I mean, it's so critical. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. When we were preparing for this, we took it from the angle of government processes, and there are 3 elements that we feel could be improved. The first one is the way the government's 5% target is presented and perceived. Rather than presenting it as a goal to be achieved by government, it should be presented as a way to help Indigenous.
I apologize, sir.
Yes.
I have to cut you off again. We're out of time, but you mentioned you have 3. Perhaps if you could provide them in writing to the committee, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Sure.
Mr. Souza, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. And I'm really impressed, actually, because a lot of work has to be done collaboratively in order to achieve success in any partnership, in any kind of business venture, especially with government. And government has taken the position that it wants to enhance prosperity throughout Canada, to support those in rural and remote communities, and to ensure truth and reconciliation and the independence of the Indigenous community is respected as we go forward. And a lot has been done in respect to that. I know the opposition is making a lot of hay about a certain situation that may have arisen as a result of the growing pains through these processes, but they're essential for us to proceed in order to enhance success in our communities right throughout Canada. In the past, there was only maybe 1%, even when the list was established, very little Indigenous procurement was being had. So much more has been achieved consequently throughout, and more has to be done. Mr. Cardigan, you made reference to capacity building and business acumen. That's what this is about, is to provide sufficient amount of resources to enable those skills, those training, that advancement to occur. And I've had some discussions with the folks from the Financing Authority, the Aboriginal, the First Nations Finance. They're doing extraordinary work independently. They're sourcing capital. They're out in the marketplace. They're doing extraordinary things to provide the resources necessary for Indigenous communities and businesses to succeed and partner with some of those major projects, especially projects of sovereignty, not just for the Indigenous community, but for Canada, especially in the far north, and mineral resources on your lands. We got to take precautions in order to protect all of that independence. So I'm looking at what we're discussing today. I don't want to discuss ingenuity. That's up to the nations to determine who's in and who's out. There's lists that's been established. There's lists that are being used separately. So I want to understand, I guess, how do we proceed in a way that enables greater success for you? And one of them is, I think you were, if I recall, somewhere here, it discusses CCIB, right? You're registered in that. Tell me what the differences is in that process of being certified that way, and then explain to the committee how you're dealing in the private sector outside of government procurement, because that's also an opportunity for the Indigenous community to proceed throughout Canada and North America and the world for that matter. Can you answer on those 2 points, please?
For the first one, in terms of the certification processes, the new process we found with CCIB, with CAMC, which is a separate one, and with the federal government's Indigenous Business Registry, they were all very similar. We had to provide information on who we are as a company, what we did, our board construct, and our ownership, right? So there was a validation in all three circumstances that the principal owners of the company were indeed Indigenous and entitled to be, and which entitled us to be registered as an Indigenous company. So I guess that's the answer to have. There were some subtle differences between the three of them, but they were essentially trying to establish who we were and that we were who we say we are. Yeah. And in terms of the second part of the question was, sorry, sir?
In terms of the private sector. So we're talking a lot about government procurement, but the idea is to facilitate and use that as a platform for you to do a whole lot more.
Right. So what we've done, and the call to action number 92 really helped us, right? Because we found that corporately, there's a lot of businesses across Canada that wanted to do something. And I remember talking to a former chief information officer for one of the big oil companies in Calgary. And she'd suggested that all of her colleagues had something to do because that company liked to give back to communities, and they could do it through contracting, through trucking, through different security services. But she, as the chief information officer, wasn't able to do it in IT. And when we presented ourselves with our training model and our goal to actually bring people into the profession and train them and grow them, she said, "This is my first opportunity to actually do something, which is what I want to do, which helps that corporation further its own commitments to Indigenous communities." And we found that across Canada with other private corporations as well.
Great. And so the idea is to try to promote some Indigenous community businesses and so forth to take advantage of the marketplace. Do they have checks and balances? I mean, we need to do audits. We need to ensure that there's integrity in the system. Any bad actors has to be appropriately, dealt with. And that happens in procurement in all. I mean, we have over 10,000 contracts or more. I don't even know how many contracts the government has, something extraordinary. So there's a few that are bad actors. We got to deal with them. Mm-hmm. And that's what procurement and that's what the office does constantly in terms of post audits.
Absolutely.
But do they do that in the private sector?
We have had, whether they do it formally or not, they've gone and validated that we're on these registries, right? So that's the first part of it. And the one thing that we're able to offer as a company is if they're engaging with us as partly to help Indigenous Canadians find that work experience, we can present them with professional resources on our team that are actually Indigenous. And I think that's a differentiator for our own company versus some of the other ones.
I know I think I'm only about 50 seconds left. So to Dave Surgery, can you talk about the resources, the entrepreneurs, startups, businesses, and how the program that's been established by the government over the course of the last few years enabled that to be so?
I apologize, Mr. Surgery. This is becoming a habit. There's no time left. That was our 6 minutes, but perhaps Mrs. Vignola can take that up, or perhaps you can provide it in writing to us. Mrs. Vignola, 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will start with Mr. Sergery, in fact. Mr. Sergery, we, over the past few weeks, have talked often about the lists that Indigenous communities and businesses have of which businesses are truly Indigenous businesses. Would it not be more effective and efficient to have these lists sent to a central organization so that the lists can be compiled by the central organization to then be used by that compiled list, that the government use that list instead of, having to check each time? The interpreter notes that the sound is not appropriate for interpretation. Interpretation will resume once technical problems are resolved.
Première Nation, ID 1N, et on est à 500
I'm sorry, Mr. Sergey. I'm afraid your interpretation is not working now.
Okay, so I have to go to English?
Well, we're not, we won't be able to translate into French, I'm afraid. So.
A point of order, Chair.
Thank you.
Just given the time constraints and the IT challenges, maybe there would be agreement to have Mr. Surgery back at some point as well. I think he's got some important testimony, but we are a bit constrained. So I think that might be the best way to do it.
I'm not saying it's not important. Let's go to other witnesses.
Yeah. Mrs. Vignola, I have to ask you to go to another witness, please.
To clarify, there's not unanimous agreement because the Liberals don't want us to have him back. So I guess we just have to move a motion to bring him back at some point. Okay.
Mrs. Vignola, go ahead, please.
Merci, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Sergerie. Je suis vraiment désolée des problèmes techniques que vous rencontrez. Est-ce qu'on quitte à aller dans l'autre langue? Est-ce qu'on peut essayer avec l'autre langue si on vous entend mieux ou pas du tout?
I apologize. We're not getting any interpretation from Mrs. Vignola now.
Could we try to have Mr. Sergerie go into the other language to see if interpretation can be done in the other direction from English to French, since it's difficult from English into French into English?
Well, no, we're not able to pick him up at all is the
Pas du
issue.
tout. OK.
So.
Donc, je suis désolée, Monsieur.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Sergerie, that you're encountering these problems. I'll go with Mr. Carignan. Mr. Carignan, we already talked about this, but I'd like to come back to a certain topic. How can we ensure that an Indigenous business that is associated with a non-Indigenous business and that signs a contract, that it is fully given work fully and that it gets the full amount that it is owed instead of being used as a shell company? You know, because the government says, well, we check afterwards, but how can we do better?
Au début, je suis désolé pour le...
First of all, I'm sorry because the question is a little bit complicated. It might be a little bit more complicated than my level of French. So I'll continue in English if that's all right.
The challenge with, when we will go with a contract with, and it happens not just in government, all over the place, we're fairly specialized. So if we win, we'll win on a bid with another partner. That partner will be the prime on the contract, so the contract will be in their name, and then we will be the subcontractor. And part of the challenge with that is that we quite often will have no visibility into what the actual terms of the contract are. And if you're in a large project, sometimes the scope will change. Sometimes there's a change in features or change in legislation, and there could be additional monies that go in and additional opportunities for ourselves as a company to put people on projects. And we may or may not know about it depending on our relationship with the client. So in terms of what would be a nice way of for ourselves as a smaller company is if it was as part of a set aside or part of a specific initiative in some other way, if we were allowed to be the prime so that we could actually see, what the whole scope of the project is, and then we would subcontract to our partner, and they may be bigger than us, but we can assess whether we're able to fill the role ourselves and grow as a company or whether we must rely on them and their expertise.
Je veux être certaine d'avoir bien compris.
I want to be sure that I've understood correctly. So if a contract is reserved for First Nations and that there's an agreement between an Indigenous and non-Indigenous company for various reasons, it's the non-Indigenous company that gets the contract, and the company to which the contract is supposed to go, because it's supposed to be for Indigenous business, it is a subcontractor most of the time, doesn't know what is in the contract. If there are changes to the contract and more people need to be hired, the Indigenous company doesn't even know, doesn't have get any more people working on it necessarily. So how is that effective or efficient for the communities to not have the Indigenous businesses there on the front lines? I'm not sure how that meets the objectives of the policy.
It probably doesn't meet the objective. It is, quite often just a difference of scale in the size of company and the difference in the level of expertise of the company. So for us to gain that ability to be the ones that are in charge of that, we need to get the experience, and that's when I spoke to business acumen of actually being the ones that are managing that contract. Or there's some other requirement that's built in on the part of the organization, in this case government, that says, okay, for whatever reason, the larger non-Indigenous company is the lead contractee, but we need to have the participation of the Indigenous partner, at the contracting table and at any of the senior leadership meetings between the government and that contractor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Boulerice, you have 6 minutes. The vote starts in 5 minutes. I'm going to suggest we just continue for the full 6 minutes, and then we'll vote, suspend the vote. Go ahead, sir.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all our witnesses for being here with us today for this very important issue. To us at the NDP, it's very important to have a serious approach for reconciliation, to have nation-to-nation relationships. That's really a priority. And I'm lucky to have a representation with my colleagues within my caucus of Indigenous, First Nations, and Inuit colleagues. So that's really something that's part of our proposals. And of course, my former colleague, Romeo Saganash, also really worked hard to make sure that the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was enshrined in law. So there's still lots of work to do, but we're still pushing in that direction. Mr. Maramis, I really appreciated what you said, and you became passionate and emotional when you talked about the issue of drinking water and access to clean drinking water. Could you explain to us where things are at, what is being done, what is not being done, and what the reality is on the ground for people in your community who unfortunately still don't have access to this very basic thing, which is water?
As an activist, the issue of clean drinking water is prevalent. I first got into this when I was working with and following the Wet'suwet'en situation from 2019. I was actually here on Parliament Hill when the Yellow Vest Convoy came on February 19th. And so I crunched the numbers in Alberta on fracking processes and the amount of water required for a single frack. And then I crunched the numbers for every Indigenous community across Canada who have no potable water, no drinking water, and it's astronomical. It's like government estimates were like 200,000. It's more closer to 300,000 in various communities such as Grassy Narrows, who has mercury in the water and contaminants, and the challenges that our communities face just for these very basic human needs. If it was the city of North Bay or Toronto, it would be declared a national emergency. But seeing as we are relegated back to the most undesirable land called reserves in this country, then we are very low priority. So when we have these kinds of exploitations that are misdirecting much needed resources away from capacity building, we do not live on fee simple land. We have these extra economic barriers when we are trying to leverage, mortgages, and build capacity. We have, like the Métis Nation of Ontario has a significant post-secondary education funding. I don't have a university degree because I don't have access to post-secondary funding through my First Nation. It's things like this. We need to increase that talent pipeline. We need to fund that talent pipeline, increase post-secondary funding for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. And we really need to study, you need to allocate dollars to study the impact of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit identity fraud on our people, because those numbers, once you realize those numbers, then there will be much more public support for deterrence and for making legal changes and making laws, creating legislation that will stop the grift in its tracks, because this is a serious misallocation of resources, traumatic misallocation of resources, and it must be stopped. And I thank you for this time on this committee to actually speak to what it actually means to somebody who does not have access to these colonial regimes and this colonial privilege, this settler privilege that Truth and Reconciliation aims to bridge. We cannot pick and choose from these calls from action and say, oh, I did this one and this one. No, look at them all and implement them all and have a commitment to them all. Make a timeline, make a framework, build these relationships, and stop First Nations, Métis, and Inuit identity fraud. Stop it. Thank you.
I'd like to continue with another question, because you talked a lot about the exploitation, the historic exploitation of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. You talked a lot about colonialism. To what extent is fraud and the stealing of that money that should go to those nations reflect what has happened in colonialism and the lack of recognition for land stewardship and so on that we still see?
The impact of fraud that's what I referred to earlier in our data deficit. Like when you don't measure these things, then you don't know the extent of the problem. So fraud has had, across all sectors, is in the billions of dollars each year. Absolute billions of dollars. And we're not, if you look beyond procurement, it's in the billions of dollars. So it is significant. It is detrimental. It is stunting our growth, our capacity. It is, it's trauma on everyday people, who live in these Indigenous communities and who are trying to build capacity, who are trying to be equal partners, but, like our resources are pilfered and misdirected and misused. And then, the general public looks at that and says, hey, these Indigenous dollars are being wasted, but hey, we're not even receiving the dollars. We're not even getting the dollars because of these misrepresentations and these exploitations. And that's the injustice.
Thanks. I have to cut us off here. We're going to suspend so we can vote, and we'll be back in a few minutes. everyone. We're unsuspended. I have Ms. Block, I understand, wishes to put a motion on notice. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I will be very brief and just get to the motion. Given recent reports that Global Affairs Canada spent $523,000 on furniture in a single day on March 31st of this year and has spent approximately $25.5 million on furniture since 2022, and considering that this apparent end-of-year budget spending blitz occurs at a time when Canadians are facing financial hardship and accessing food banks in record numbers, the committee invites senior officials from Global Affairs Canada to a meeting to explain this spending. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.